Christians had to explain, why don't the Jews buy it? It's their Bible. It's their concept of Messiah. Only they can read Hebrew. No one else can. Why don't they believe it? That's a problem. If the Chinese don't believe in Jesus, well, the Chinese don't know anything about it. The Jews.
The dying, saving man God, all these things, you have all these parallels. Does that show us more of, the worldview of the audience, like who it's being written to, rather than the writer themselves? It would seem that if this is what you're trying to do, it's not being written to a Torah Judaism audience.
It's written in Greek, my friend. So, hello. I mean, these books are written in Greek. Do I need to say more? I mean, full stop, end. The books, it's important for the viewers to understand how meaningful that is. Greek was not just another language that's not Hebrew and not related to the Hebrew language at all. Greek was the language of the enemy of the Jews. Greece, it's not like today, like Spanish is just a different language. Everything Greek was evil in Judaism because they were wrong about everything. And who is Paul speaking to? Paul is not speaking to Jews there are some exceptions, but interestingly, Paul is always speaking to non-Jews with very few exceptions. The notable exception is Romans chapter 7, where he's speaking to Jews. But strikingly, he's speaking to Jews who he's never met before because he's writing to Rome. When he wrote the book of Romans, he had never been to Rome. He had not yet been to Rome. So he's writing to people he's never spoken to and saying that you don't have to keep the Torah either. So it's very plain that the Christian Bible is an enemy text of Judaism. And I am really very grateful that most Christians don't read their own Bible. Most people don't realize how anti-Jewish it is. And all you need to do is take out Matthew chapter 27. It's a nightmare. Mel Gibson simply reads the Christian Bible, the Passion narratives. When I watched The Passion of the Christ, I watched it twice. Behind me, there were two Korean girls crying their brains out. This is like a theological snuff film. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion is the New Testament rewritten for the Tsar. What I'm saying is not the rantings of a person who's critical of Christianity. The major theme of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is that the Jews, actually their elders, gather and plot out human history, and we control the world. We control governments around the world. That's the whole point. The whole point is the Jews are a villainous people, they are subhuman, a virus, but they control everything. And when you read the Gospels, the one thing that comes across is that Pontius Pilate is very reluctant about all this. He says openly in Matthew, he says, Matthew 27, I wash my hands of this. His wife is screaming, this man's innocent. Pontius Pilate's got a wife who's going. So imagine the scene. Pontius Pilate and his wife, the only two Gentiles present, are going, we think this is a very bad idea. And they're just going, crucify him. We take his blood upon ourselves and our children in verse 25. What the heck is going on there? So the idea is, this is very important, that Pontius Pilate in the Gospels is a lackey of the Jews. That's what's coming across. The Jews are demanding something. Pontius Pilate was a really bad guy, according to every source. He was a crazy man. But the key in the Gospels that all of them share uniformly is that the Jews really controlled everything, and Pontius Pilate was a lackey of the Jews and had to give in to the crazy hordes of Jews who hated Christ and wanted him dead. We can sit and talk about contradictions, which is very intriguing, but what I think is much more important is that the Gospels agree on this across the board. Pontius Pilate does whatever the Jews demand, and it's the Jews that wanted him dead and by any means kill him. And Pontius Pilate is going, I don't think so. And in John 19, I think it's verse 11, Jesus confirms to Pontius Pilate that actually your sin is not very important. It's really the ones who gave me over to you. It's their sin that's greater. The protocols is that the Jews control the world. The Jews, and we see it, the Jews control the media. We control Hollywood. Who would know? We apparently control chess because half of the world chess champions are Jews, and I don't know how the Jews are pulling that one off. Whatever. We control the bank. We control all of it. That's the key. That's the key, and that's where everyone agrees. That's all the Gospels are the same. It's intriguing to talk about contradictions, but what's very important is that never changes. The Jews are culpable, and that's why in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Pontius Pilate is considered a saint. They have a tradition of Pontius Pilate renounced everything, committed suicide, and they venerate him. And who is Paul speaking to in 1 Thessalonians 2, where he condemns the Jews for killing Jesus and says that they're contrary to mankind? 1 Thessalonians, you know all that is? That might have been written in 49. I mean, that may very well be the oldest surviving Christian literature, right? That might have been written in the 40s, at the end of the 40s. And Paul is blaming the Jews for killing Jesus. Of course he's not writing for Jews. I mean, this is what I'm expressing here is not advanced, complicated stuff. This is all written to a non-Jewish audience. Because let me say one other point here. Why is it so anti-Jewish? Why? Because they have to, early Christians as well as late modern Christians have to explain away a major conundrum. Why don't the Jews believe in Jesus? I have spoken to many Christian leaders in my life. When I ask them, what is the question that comes up most frequently? One of them is, why don't the Jews believe in Christ, right? That's the big question. Like, why don't the Jews, if it's so obvious, the Jews have a reputation of being fairly intelligent. We win all these Nobel Prizes, and we can't figure out this. So Christians had to explain, why don't the Jews buy it? It's their Bible. It's their concept of Messiah. Only they can read Hebrew. No one else can. Why don't they believe it? So you can either say one of two things. You can either say what a nice liberal Episcopalian would say. The liberal professor would say, the Jews read their Old Testament and draw a different conclusion. If you went to Union Theological, that's what they tell you. That's what a professor would say, because they're liberal and honest and scholarly. But you can't tell that to a bunch of Southern Baptists. They'll go, what do you mean the Jews draw a different conclusion? And in the ancient world, it was the same deal. You have to explain this very awkward predicament. The Jews don't believe that the Jewish Bible is speaking about Jesus. That's a problem. If the Chinese don't believe in Jesus, well, the Chinese don't know anything about the Jews. So you have to therefore explain that the Jews are blinded, that the Jews are evil, that the Jews never could see their salvation. They never could figure out their own book. They always turn their back on God. And that's the same idea that fueled the epistle of Barnabas. The Jews never understood their own book. That's what's really going on. The Jews never understood it, and moreover, they're enemies of God, and they are the children of the devil, John 8:44. They're in opposition against God. In the Christian Bible, most people don't realize this, even when the leaders, the scribes and the priests, discover that Jesus resurrected from the dead, they are ready to bribe the Roman soldiers to say that they fell asleep. Why? Wouldn't they go, oh, he did rise from the dead? Okay, we'll become Christians. No, they're in it even when they know it happened, as we're told in Matthew's, at the very end of the book of Matthew. So of course Christians hate Jews. Now today it's not fashionable. Anti-Semitism is not socially acceptable. I mean, generally. But you don't say I hate Jews. There are all kinds of euphemisms that people can use, but the Christian Bible, that's what's going on. The reason why the Jews have to be portrayed and characterized as demonic is because if they're not demonic, then you have to explain away their rejection of Christianity. It's that simple.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה